Okay, so let's take a look at MySQL Workbench. So if you have yet to install MySQL on your Windows or Linux or Mac, I suggest going to mysql.com and then click on download section. Okay, by default download section will take you to premium downloads, so we have to check for community edition. Okay, so here you can see enterprise edition listed here, and you can scroll to the bottom and check for community downloads. Similarly, you can also go to bottom for checking community server. You can click on either one of these two links. So I will click on this community downloads link, and here you can see I need to download MySQL installer for Windows. So this single installer contains all the necessary tools that I need for MySQL, which includes Workbench, MySQL shell. So I will download this 64-bit or 32-bit depending on my operating system. Okay, you have installer that does web-based installation or one installer that downloads everything. Okay, after running that installer and installing MySQL, I can see Workbench in my recently added MySQL here. So MySQL, and here you can see I have Workbench, shell, notifier, installer, command line clients. Okay, so out of that we have to go for Workbench CE. So CE here stands for community edition, so MySQL Workbench 8 CE. Okay, so if you're seeing this in future, the version could be something higher like version 9 or 10 or maybe 11, 12. So the basic points remain the same here, that you have to download a single installer, and once installed on Windows you can find that within menu of MySQL, and there you have to click on Workbench option. Okay, once that Workbench loads, it should show you a screen that looks something like this. Okay, now here you can see when you install your MySQL, you will have one user, which is root, and also one local host and port 3306 configured for you. Okay, you can add a new connection by clicking on this plus icon, and it should open one prompt that looks something like this, where you can create new connection, use your root username and password, and test that connection. Okay, so currently I already have one instance ready, so what I will do is I will click on this local instance. Okay, now once you logged in, you will have your dashboard that shows local instance MySQL 8 that looks something like this. On the left hand side you will find a navigator where you can check your management options for your server, like server status, client connections, users status, data import and export. There is also instance where you can see startup shutdown, server logs and options file. Then there is also performance, dashboard, performance report, performance schema setup. Okay, these are the navigator options. In middle you can find query. Here you can write the queries and execute them. Okay, and on right hand side you will have SQL additions, so that help is listed on the right. So any output that you wish to see from query will be available in the bottom. And there is also information tab, which will give information on administration and schema. So when you click on schema tab, your navigator will also change, showing you these three schemas. So Sakila, Sys and Vault. These three are the schemas that are available to you. Okay, so this is the default Workbench that you see. Now you can create SQL files for your queries. Also you can use existing script from your disk. Then there is also inspector for checking your query, and then there is new schema, then new table, then new view. Also you have stored procedures and functions that you can create. Along with you have search options that you can check on table, and there is also connect to reconnection options. Okay, and for the options from file, edit, view, query, database, and few others, we will go through them depending on our session in what context to use this database menu or server or tools or scripting. So this is the MySQL Workbench that you will be using for working with your MySQL database. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can use sample database with MySQL Workbench. So if you have yet to install MySQL Workbench, what you can do is you can go to mysql.com, and here you can find a download section. Okay, that download section should have this enterprise edition as well as community downloads option at the bottom. You can also choose from community downloads, and then go to MySQL installer for Windows. Okay, here you would find MySQL shell and Workbench all inclusive in this installer. Go with the one that applies to your operating system, and in case of Windows, once installed you will find that in menu, and then you can check the install MySQL here, and here you can see MySQL shell and Workbench. So C here implies community edition, so I'm going to click on this, and hopefully it should start without any errors. Okay, so for first run it should already ask you for username and password, and after that you would be able to directly get into your database. So we'll wait for it to load. Okay, so once loaded it should look something like this. Okay, so it will have this top menu: file, edit, view, database, tool, settings, and help. Okay, so here you will also find the available set of connections. So by default it will have one, because this is the one that you used while installation. Okay, new connection can be done by clicking on this plus icon, and here you can add your details and create new connection. Okay, currently we have default local instance to which we can log in. For that we may have to type in password. It should load our Workbench dashboard that looks something like this. Now here you can see in the navigator you have schemas that shows 3 databases, one being world, second being sys for system, and first being here Sakila database. So this comes in pre-installed these days. Okay, now what you can do is you can open your query editor and see if you can access one of the default database schemas. So type in use Sakila, use semicolon, and just run this query. Okay, so here you can see it will show you this list of tables, and in action output you will also find 0 rows affected. Okay, now what we can do is we can simply check out all these show full tables. Okay, so let me execute this, and here you go, it is showing me the output. Now you can see that all the tables which are listed in this side left hand side schema will be also visible in the output as well. Okay, now what we can do is we can choose from one of the table. So let's say select count. So we will choose all from city. So we'll find out how many rows are there for city. Okay, it will return with 600. So we are basically dealing with 600 amount of entries within your city table. Okay, so what we can do is we can select everything from city, and let's try and see the output. And here you go, you have your output that shows your columns here, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so let's check how many rows are there. So there you go, total 600 rows, and that much data within our only city table from Sakila database. So as you can see, your MySQL Workbench comes with these 3 databases, this being default, World and Sakila being 2 other databases that gets populated and added to your workbench during the time of installation. So you get the idea that how you can use default sample databases, how to run your queries using this query editor, and how to navigate to that sample database through this schema navigator. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can check server status with MySQL Workbench. So here you can see mysql.com website, where I'm going to click on this downloads link. So once we go to downloads page, we'll find that at the bottom there is also one community downloads link page. I'm going to click on that one because we need to download free server edition, and here you can see multiple download links where we have to check for MySQL installer for Windows. Okay, so this is single installer that will pack in all the necessary tools for development, and you can go through that single installer to set up your server client and also the workbench along with MySQL shell as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Windows menu link, then go to the menu, and here you can see I have this MySQL option, and here you can see MySQL Workbench CE. So I'm going to click on that. So basically this C means community edition. Okay, so once that loads in, we will log into our MySQL server. Okay, now here you see I have one local instance of MySQL running. Here I'm going to click on that. It will have root as user because by the time of installation I only set up one user, so that user will be listed here. So I just have to type in the password and click on OK. Now this should take me to dashboard. Okay, now here you can see on the left hand side I have navigator that contains administration and schema, and on right hand side I have this query editor. In the bottom you can see the output with multiple tabs here that shows action output, text output, and history of past ran queries. Okay, so you can also adjust this layout by clicking on these buttons. So here you can see right hand sidebar is hidden, which you can make it visible by clicking on this. Then you can hide the bottom as well, or left hand sidebar. So I'm currently only hiding this additions sidebar. Okay, and what we can do here is, in order to check for server status, I'm going to click on administration, and in management section you can find server status. So click on that server status link. That should show you this window here. Now here you can see it shows you a lot of information like your host name, socket, port, version, and the operating system and where it is all running, along with running since. So let's say if I installed it yesterday and I have information 1 day and 10 hours, and also some of the other information like what features are available. Considering this is community edition, there won't be many options here. Okay, but if you want to check the performance, what you can do is, let's say if you run query something like this, show, or you can use something like use and give one of the database name. Okay, so I'm going to add one query there. If I execute this, let me check for output. Okay, so this query worked. I want to check in server status what was the traffic. So here you can see, and also you can see the number of connections there. You can see total 4, and also how much buffer usage is also taken. Okay, so information like that is visible on this server status page. You can see how much resources are being in use by this server. All this information is listed here. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can check for client connections in MySQL Workbench. So first thing, make sure to go to mysql.com and click on downloads link. This should take you to enterprise edition download, but we are not going for that. Instead, click on this community downloads so that we can download community edition. And here you can see list of available downloads, and these are some of the tools that you would need for development. So in my case, I have downloaded this installer for Windows that contains everything you need for MySQL development. Okay, once you download, open your menu in Windows, then go to MySQL menu here, and here you can see MySQL Workbench Community Edition. So see here stands for Community Edition. Click on that and it should load your new window. Okay, that says MySQL Workbench, and here you can see MySQL connections, which has default root user. Okay, so if you have added any more users, you can use them as well, but by default you will have to log in as root if you only added that user. Now let me log in. Here you can see our setup that looks something like this: navigator and information tab on left sidebar, query that takes entire right hand side screen. I can also add the bottom output and right hand sidebar for snippets and SQL additions. Okay, so for now what we are going to do is we are going to open client connection. So we can do that in two ways: by choosing this administration setting from navigator, click on this client connection. Here you can see total 4 users, 2 threads running, 4 created, and all the users that are connected. So total 4 are root and 2 being service thread. Okay, 1 in sleep and 1 you can see in demo mode. Okay, so basically we have 4 connections that are listed here. Okay, you can get this output through a query as well. For that, let's close this tab. Now in query tab, what you can do is type in show, then type in process list, and then semicolon. Okay, So if that autocomplete is on, make sure to keep it on so that it can save you some time from typing. So queries show process list, and that should also display client connections. So run this query, and here you can see you are currently available. So total 2 root instance and 1 being daemon service. Okay, so totally 3 are active right now that you can check from your query. So you can use either query or this management shortcut for accessing client connection. Okay, and you get information from either one of those. The query one gives you limited information, but your administrative client connection section, that will give you more deeper information about that service, the connected users, the command, time and their state, along with information and the program being used by those users. So you get the idea how to use client connection within MySQL Workbench. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can use MySQL table editor in MySQL Workbench. So if you haven't installed MySQL Workbench, go to mysql.com and then go to downloads section. Okay, now here you have to scroll to the bottom and find community downloads. Click on this link and search for community server, and here you can see MySQL installer for Windows. So on that page you have to choose the one that applies in your case. Here you can see 400 MB worth of download. Once you download this, you can then check whether you have your Workbench and shell installed. In menu you can go to MySQL. Okay, so here you can see I have community edition of Workbench and shell. Okay, once you install that, click on your menu and make sure to open this Workbench. Okay, that should open screen that looks something like this. Now here by default you have one local instance that you download when you install your MySQL installer, and that instance will have one root user and password as well. You can add additional users, and by default you have one that you can use. So here I'm going to add my password. Now this should open Workbench dashboard. Okay, by default you will have one query editor, navigator that shows administration and schemas sidebar. Okay, then there is output at the bottom and also session and information on left hand sidebar. Now here I'm going to check for this schema Sakila. Okay, now here we can edit a table by going through tables. Now we have a lot of tables here. We can choose from, let's say if I choose to edit city table, you can click on that and it will automatically take you to query which you don't want. So what you should be doing is select it, right click. Now here you can check table inspector. You can also check SQL editor if you wish to create queries. So right now let's inspect the table. Right, when you inspect the table it will show you details regarding that table, where you can click on first thing info. That will show you information like engine used, row format, column count, table rows, etc. Okay, then you have columns tab here. Okay, now here you can see the available set of columns, indexes, okay, then triggers, which you can check or create new by adding in it, then foreign keys. Okay, you have 2 foreign keys, then partition, then grant for table access. So we have like 3 users who can access this, and there is DDL for this particular table. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to check this option. Now when you want to use table editor, what you can do is right click on table by selecting on it and then click on alter table. Now that should show you this option with multiple tabs at the bottom. By default you can edit the columns, so here you can see. Okay, let me just show you specific details one at a time. So table name can be edited. You can also change character set, change the engine, as well as add comments. Now let's check the bottom. Now here you can see you can edit the column names, its data type, and also set the flags like primary key, binary, then unique, right, not null, then there is unsigned, then 0 field, auto increment, and generated. Okay, so here you can see in expression you have expression for timestamp. Okay, this was for column. In case of indexes, you can find 2 indexes right here. There is also foreign keys. Okay, here you can see foreign key that reference to country table. So country is here. Okay, then there are triggers, so you can set them when you want to set a trigger before insert, after insert, update, or delete. Based on these total combinations, you can choose your trigger. Similarly, there are also partitioning options. You can enable, disable from here, and then apply. Finally, the options. So you have general, row, storage, and merge table options. Okay, we will go in detail on these options later. So you get the idea. When you wish to use table editor, what you can do is right click on table, then alter table. That should open these properties which you can edit. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can use MySQL Workbench for generating SQL and PHP code. So first thing, make sure to go to mysql.com and click on download section, and here you can also find community downloads, which we are going to use for MySQL installer. So this is for Windows, and you can click on the link, and here you can choose either web-based installer or this single big install. Okay, around 400 MB size. Once you install that, you can open your Windows menu, check for MySQL. Okay, here you can see. Now here I wish to use this Workbench Community Edition, so I'm going to click on it. Okay, once it opens, you have to use your root username and password for the instance that is available to you. Okay, here you can see I have one instance that accepts only root user. Okay, you can add additional users to your connection. Okay, as of now we are going to make use of default root username and password. So Let me enter it. After it opens your dashboard, what you can do is you have two options. First being, you can choose your table. Now here, let's see if I choose city table. Okay, I can right click on it, and you see I have this option here, send to SQL editor. So let's say if I choose name from city table, okay, it will send that particular column. Okay, so when you are typing query and want to use that particular column name, you can use that. Additionally, you can also right click and select all statement, where you can see all the columns will be called from your city table. Here the query is given to you. Okay, so if you directly run it, it will give you that output as well. Okay, now what you can do is you can also right click and go for create statement, update, insert statement. So let's check how it works. So here you can see it will insert into your table where ID, city, country ID, and last update. Okay, and its options and values are here. So when you update something, you make new query by clicking on this. Similarly, you can delete something with delete statement, and also you can create a statement. Okay, this was for SQL code generation, but what if you want to use PHP code? So in such case, what we can do is we can simply go to tools, then utilities, copy as PHP code, let's say connect to server. Similarly, there is also copy as PHP code, iterate, select results. Okay, these two are also possible. Okay, so depending on your requirement for your project, these two, connect to server and iterating results, code would vary. Okay, so these are two methods through which you can generate SQL and PHP code respectively. In the order I showed you, you can click on your table and send to SQL editor with various queries. Okay, similarly for PHP, you can use that tools utilities plugin that says copy as PHP code. So when you work on specific columns, you can use these utilities for connecting and iterating, select, and connection statements. So you get the idea how to use SQL and PHP code generation in MySQL Workbench. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can add new user in MySQL Workbench. So first thing to do would be go to official mysql.com website, and here you can see downloads link. So I'm going to click on that, and at first you can see enterprise edition. We are going to skip that and move to community downloads. You can also find community server here in the footer. So we will move to community downloads. Now here you can see MySQL installer for Windows. Click on that and find the installer which you can work with. Here you can choose web-based installer or complete installer with 427 MB of size. Okay, once you install this, go to your Windows menu, and here you can check for MySQL. Okay, here you can see I have MySQL Workbench here, which I am going to click on. So C here stands for Community Edition. So click on that and it should open Workbench instance. Okay, in setup you have to give one user for Workbench, like you need to have root username and password. Okay, so let's wait for Workbench to load. Now here you can see, once the Workbench loaded, you will see screen that looks something like this. Now here you have one instance, okay, that shows root as user. Click on that. Okay, now it should ask you for password that you set during installation. Okay, and then it will load your dashboard in Workbench. Okay, now here you have navigator on left sidebar, query on right. Okay, also output and information. Also there is right hand side sidebar that is hidden right now. Okay, now in administration tab of navigator you can check for users and privileges. Now here you can see by default you have one root user, okay, and also one user which can choose any host. Basically this is your Windows account and few other service accounts. Now to add new account to your connection, you have to click on add account. Here you have to give it a name. Okay, authentication type, choose password. We can use standard. So for standard password you can choose standard. Okay, you can limit to any host. Okay, and here you have to type your password. Okay, you have to confirm as well. Okay, it will also prompt you if the password is weak, and once you are done with this you can click on apply. Okay, now it is asking you to use bigger password, so let's go with something bigger. Okay, now click on apply. Go. Okay, so now once you added that account, you can find that your account is listed here. Okay, so you can also add and remove from here as well. So if you wish to delete that, you can simply click on delete. Okay, it will ask you if you really want to remove, then you can choose that option. Otherwise you have to click cancel. So you get the idea how to add new user in your local instance of MySQL from Workbench. So let's take a look at how you can create EAR diagram in MySQL Workbench. So first step is make sure that you have MySQL installed. I have Community Edition installed on my Windows. So if you have yet to install, go to mysql.com, then click on downloads, and there you have to find community downloads link. Okay, it's in the bottom, and here when you go to that link you will find MySQL installer for Windows. Now here you can choose between web-based installer or your full installer, which is 400 and so MB. So once you install this, you can go to your Windows menu and then check for your MySQL installation. here you can see MySQL Workbench. Click on that. Here the C is community edition, so every time you see MySQL edition with C around it, you can guess it's community edition, and it will be free with some limitations which are often covered in premium or enterprise edition. So this workbench is also community edition workbench. Now to create ER diagram, we make use of model. Okay, so if you check the screen, if you go to file, you will find there is option to create new model. Okay, simply clicking on this should open new interface. Okay, you will notice that this interface currently is connected to only one default database, which is MyDB MySQL schema. Okay, so here you have to add your tables, also add views and routines in order to get that diagram. Okay, here in model menu you can create diagram from catalog objects. Okay, so currently we don't have much data in MyDB, so I'm going to close this model. Now if you check this icon in Workbench, you will find that it shows models, and by default it has Sakila database with one default model made for you. Okay, click on that and it should load that model here. Okay, now here you can see it already has one ER diagram loaded as well. Okay, it shows you all the relationship between your customer data, inventory. Okay, and whenever you try to create some new relationship, it should immediately create this box over there. Okay, so let me delete this. Okay, and save this. Okay, so permission denied because I tried to override on read-only file. Okay, so here you can see the relationship already established on some of the tables in Sakila database. Okay, so if we go to our own Sakila database here and try to create it from scratch, we can go to module menu, then create diagram from catalog objects, and here by default you can see there are options here that shows relationship with your actors, sales by store, and multiple other table data. So you have multiple tables within your Sakila database. Okay, so which you can access from here. So actor, address, category, city, country, customer, film, inventory, language, payment, rental, staff, store. So here if you want to start from scratch, you can simply delete all of this. Okay, so you get the idea. In order to create a diagram, you can go to model and then add a diagram. Okay, and it will save that with new name ER diagram 2. So every time you click on that option, add diagram or create diagram, both will create a new diagram within your model. Okay, from there you have to add your own table list. So let's see if I add city. Okay, and if I want to check for, let's say, store, and if there is any foreign key linking between the two, we can check that and make a relationship diagram out of this. So you get the idea how to create basic model in MySQL Workbench for your ER diagram. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can export your MySQL database table to CSV file. So make sure that you have MySQL Workbench ready, and if you have not installed it, go to mysql.com and check for downloads page. There at the bottom we have to check for community downloads. Click on that, then go for installer for Windows if you have Windows. otherwise you have to follow the instruction for your operating system. In my case, I installed this MSI installer of around 400 MB size. After installation, go to menu in Windows, check for MySQL Workbench Community Edition, click on that. It should open something like this. Now in your case there could be one instance with root login. Click on that, make sure to input your password. Okay, now let me clean up any previous queries. Now here you can see I have 3 databases, Sakila, Sys and World. So from Sakila database I'm going to check for, let's say, city table, right? And I'm going to select that and right click on it, send SQL editor, select all statement. So the all columns will be selected. You can choose this query or simply remove this and simply use star operator and select everything from Sakila.city table. Okay, now run this query. Okay, here you can see total amount of rows here are 600, and if you want to export this to CSV, find the option here where you can see export to external file. Now you can choose where you wish to export this. Let's say if I choose E files, say PDB, and here I want to export this saying Sakila city. Okay, so city table from Sakila database exported as type CSV. Okay, now what we can do is we can navigate to that particular path, go to E directory. Now here I have to find that file, so let's check out Sakila city. Okay, here it is. If I double click on it, it should open CSV file in Excel. So let me wait for that to load. Okay, you can also limit how many rows to display. You can filter rows with those conditions. Okay, now here you can see all the columns are now exported. Now here you can see total 601 rows are visible. Okay, and you can edit them and save them in any other file format of your choice. Right, so you get the idea how to export your data from MySQL database table to some other format like CSV file from MySQL Workbench. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can export your MySQL database table to JSON file. So first thing, make sure to install MySQL through your installer for Windows, and make sure to install Workbench as well. You can do that by going to mysql.com, then click on downloads link. Now here you can find community downloads, check for Windows installer. Okay, so this is the second one, installer, which is of 400 or so MB, which you should be installing. Okay, after installation, click on Windows menu, go to MySQL. Now here you can see Workbench. Okay, so click on that. It should load with screen that looks something like this, and then check for the install instance, which is going to be local. Now here you have to type in password for your root account. Okay, now let me clear previous queries and choose the schema from here. So I have like 3 schemas, world, JSON, and Sakila. So out of which I'm going to choose table from Sakila and choose table, let's say city. Select that and right click on that particular table, then send the query select all statement. Here you can see it individually selects all the 4 columns. I can replace that with, let's say, star operator. Okay, now my query will be select all from this Sakila database and then table is city table. If I run this query, okay, what I can do is can view my table entries. There must be total 601 or so entries. Okay, and here if I want to export this to JSON file, what I can do is check for this section export and import and choose export record set to external file. Now here you can see I am in a particular directory on E drive. I want to check for JSON file. Okay, so JSON file and let's say city JS or JSON city. Okay, that would be appropriate name. Okay, and I can click on save. That immediately saves all the JSON data which I can navigate to. And here you can see this data. Now I have multiple ways to open this. Let's see if I can open it with Visual Studio Code or even in Sublime Text. So let me go with Sublime Text. And the source is my project directory. And here you can see Sakila JSON city.json. So all the entries from that city table are into JSON format. So this primary key which auto increments here is shown with city_id, and our timestamp that shows in last update. Okay, total 601 or 600 entries are here. Okay, all in JSON format. Okay, so you get the idea how to create a result set and then use export option and then save it as JSON file format. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can export your MySQL table data from your Workbench to Excel file. Okay, so we are going to download MySQL Workbench from mysql.com, then go to downloads section. Now here find the community downloads. Okay, now choose the SQL installer for Windows. Then here you can choose web-based or community installer. So community installer here goes for 427 megabytes. It should include all the tools listed in earlier pages. Once installed, you can go to your menu, check for MySQL. So here you can see MySQL and MySQL Workbench CE. So CE here stands for Community Edition. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait for Workbench to load, then connect to the local instance, that is default instance of your MySQL Workbench. Okay, Okay, now once loaded, it should look something like this. Now here you can see by default I have one local instance. Here you can see I have root username. Click on that. It should load. Okay, now let me add in the password. Okay, now that should load our dashboard. Okay, let me clean up the query. Okay, now next thing is to check for your schema, where you can see Sakila database. Then go for table you wish to export. Now let's send in the select all query. Right, now let's run this. Okay, now what we can do is, okay, now once you run this query, you will find that list of total rows that are being shown in result grid. Now to export, click on this button, and here you can choose which file format you want. So here you can see Excel spreadsheet, right? And here you can choose city data. Click on save, and here you can see our city data here. So let me refresh, and here you see city data file. Okay, so you get the idea how to export your MySQL table data using MySQL Workbench for Excel spreadsheet export. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can export your MySQL database table into SQL file using MySQL Workbench. So log into mysql.com, check for download section. There we have to find the community downloads. Now we need all-in-one installer for Windows, which contains all these connectors and necessary Workbench shell router as well. So choose this installer. Now pick up the one with highest value for download. So here you can see 427.6 megabytes. So that's the highest size. Go for this direct download instead of doing the web-based installation. After installation, you can find in menu, go to MySQL and check for Workbench Community Edition. Once it loads, we have to log into local instance of MySQL. Okay, so by default you can see I have one local instance with root username. Clicking on that should prompt for password, which you used for installation purpose. So here you can see in navigator you can click on administration tab, and here you can see option for data export. Click on that. Now it will show you the available schema. So you have to choose which schema you wish to export. So let's see, I choose Sakila one. Now we can refresh it if there is any. Okay, so currently I want to dump structure and data as well. If you want, you can choose either data or just structure. Okay, now what we can do is we can check for file location. Here you can see it is currently stored in my documents. I wish to change that to different path. Okay, and here I wish to export that. So you can choose as a folder or you can choose SQL file. Okay, again we will go for same path and let's name this Sakila.sql, right? You can choose the option create a dump file in single transaction, self-contained file only, and you can also use include create schema. Okay, so if there is not this schema listed, it will create it. Okay, now here you can see you also have advanced options that you can go through, but I'm going to ignore that considering the default works. And then you can press this start export and it will show you the progress, and once finished you can see it says export completed. Now what we can do is go to this path and check for that file. And you can see Sakila.sql file. What we can do is right click and open it in some text editor, say like Visual Studio Code. You can also use any other editor you have. Okay, so let me try Sublime Text. Okay, and we will verify the contents of this Sakila.sql. Now here you can see Sakila.sql. If you select that, it should show you SQL file and its queries, creating tables. Okay, right, so what it is doing right now is creating the table. Okay, so this is for structure only, and okay, it also creates database with that name because we used that in our instruction on creating the schema if not available, so it will use that as first query. Okay, so you get the idea how to export your MySQL data from MySQL Workbench and export it as SQL file.